G'day guys, this is part 7 derp, part 7 of the Xray XB2 Dirt Edition build series. Part 7, you're going to be building the shocks, well, a shock. I've already done 3 off camera, so this is what we're aiming for, and this is going to be, it's pretty easy. It can be a little time consuming. I also recommend you take your time when building it. Now, should point out that there are, when you go to build the shocks, there are 3 bottles with silicone oil. You have 500 weight, which is what we have for the front shocks, 350 weight for the rear shock, and you have 3000 weight. Now this, they obviously just include this, they obviously have in the bag to shot it in, because this is for if you have the carpet edition with the gear diff, so this is unnecessary, but if you have other car kits, keep it, come in handy. So we're doing the front shock now. Front and rear shocks have different weight oils. So as I said before, the rear shocks have the 350 weight oil, and the front shocks have the 500 weight. So we are doing the front shocks, so we need the 500 weight. So when you, first part what we're going to be doing is assembling the shock pistons. Now I'm doing it to kit setup. So it's the 3-hole 1.3 millimeter shock piston. Now when you get it, it'll come on like a part tree, I guess you call it. And when you break it off, I recommend with a hobby knife, or even a little bit of wet and dry sandpaper, just where the bit of spur, like the spur is on the side where you break it off, just give it a scrape like that, just to get rid of the bit of excess plastic that's there. Now what we got to do is put these E-clips on. Now we start with the bottom one. Now when you're doing this, these E-clips are very small and they're black. So when you're doing it, I recommend you do it over here like this, over the table, because what can happen is you can slip and this thing will just go pew, and you've lost an E-clip, and you don't want to spend 45 minutes on the floor looking for an E-clip that you're never going to find. So be very careful. Now we put the piston on. Doesn't matter which way it goes on. There's only, well, there's no right way up. So now we just very carefully there we go, click. Simple as that. Alright, now the next part, what we need to do is put in some O-rings in the bottom here. Now one thing I recommend you use is this Factory Team Green Slime. You can get it, A-Main Hobbies, Tower Hobbies, possibly Absolute Hobbies. I like to use this instead of using silicone oil, because I find that it seals the shock, the O-rings better. So put a little bit in, and you just run it around. You'll need to do this a couple of times when you do each shock. So now what we'll do is we'll put an O-ring in, then a white plastic washer, and another O-ring. Then just get another little bit of green slime, and it should look a bit like that. Okay, now the next part, is we have this washer. Now what it does is it fits into this bottom collar. Now if you look closely, you can see that it's got a lip, so that has to face, well, technically what is upwards or downwards, but where the shock is upside down, so it should look like that. See if I can just get it to focus. There you go. So it should look like that. Now next part is we put, probably should have done this earlier, put this little black O-ring around here. So that O-ring just goes around there. So we just put this cap, this little washer back on, and then we put the cap on. Do it up nice and tight, because you don't want any shock oil to come out. Alright. Now the next part is we put in the shock piston. Pull it through, wipe off any excess slime that might get on the shaft. Alright, now we need the bottom shock collet. What this does is it's to hold the little, hold the eyelet on that will then attach to the suspension arm. Now when you're doing this part here, you'll need to use some side cutters, and you put it right at the edge of the thread there. Don't put it on the shaft, put it right there, and don't crimp down hard on it, really hard, just enough so it stops the shock shaft from spinning, so you can tighten this up. Alright, so that's that bit done. So what we're going to do now is this, what this is here, this is your preload collar. We have big O-ring, goes in. Just put your finger in there and just make sure it sits in the little, where it's seated up top. Okay, so put that through. Alright, now the next bit is we have our shock cap and another O-ring. This one will have to go inside the cap. Make sure it's seated correctly, make sure it's not, the O-ring isn't kinked up a bit, make sure it's nice and flat. Alright, now next part is we will fill the shock. Well, first of all what we'll do is we'll put this eyelet through. This will just save time. Alright, so the eyelet's in. So now what we have to do is we will use this. Now this is a shock pump. Don't confuse it with something else. We'll put it in here. The whole idea of this is to suck the air out, because usually when I build a shock, I will let it sit for, when I fill it, you push the shock shaft up and down, so then you'll see it sucks the air bubbles up to the top, and then you let it sit for, I usually sit for about 30-40 minutes. We don't have that amount of time. So what we do is we get our shock oil, give it a good squeeze. Now fill it mostly all the way up. Then push the shock shaft up, then push it down, and there are some air bubbles in there. Now what I'll try to get this on camera, and I'll put it up to the camera so you can see. So what we'll do now is we will put the cap on here, and then we pump away. Now you can't really see it too well, but you can see it's sucking the air bubbles out from there. So that's what that's doing, it's sucking all the air out so you don't have air in your shocks. Now while we're waiting for that to happen, we will get our little eyelet through here. Now I like to have the little screw pointing outwards, so that's going to be the left shock, this is going to be the right shock. Okay, there it is. Let's push this eyelet through. Alright, now just before you do that, you'll want to pre-thread the screw into the cap here before you do the bleeding procedure. So I'll do it. So now that's done. Air bubbles are out. Now what we do is we put some more shock oil on the top here. Have it so it looks like it's about to overflow. And then carefully put the shock on, make sure you don't cross thread it. Do it up nice and tight. Okay, now the next part, what we're going to do now is bleed it and set the rebound. Now rebound is when you push the shock in and then how far it comes back out. So initial setting is 0 rebound, and I kind of like that because that suits my style of driving. So what we'll do is we push it in and you should see some oil come out the shock cap. There you go. So you push it all the way in. Put the screw in, just excuse me a sec, it's going to be off camera. Alright, just clean it up. You can probably use a little degreaser on this, or maybe a little simple green just to clean the shock up. Alright, so now we pull the shaft out and we'll put the spring end cap on. Okay, and there we have it, a built shock. And it's not squishy. So that's the end of the shock. That's how you build a shock, guys. That's the end of part 7. Stay tuned for part 8, where we will get on with the final assembly. So we'll be installing electronics and shock towers. Stay tuned, guys.